Today's podcast is tips for tryouts. Kids try out all the time for different teams. They get nervous. Parents get nervous. Coaches get nervous. Everybody gets nervous. So these are good tips for tryouts. We're happy to have Coach Ernie here today with us.
Yeah, thanks, Coach. It's one of those topics that, as a player, when you're going into that first day, here are some really simple ideas or tips to help you with the things you can do physically, like on the court, and also the things you can do that you can totally control. We call them tangible things and intangible things. So I think we just kind of came up with this list of just a few simple, practical things that can help you feel more prepared. Obviously, if you're right at the beginning of your tryout, the time to prepare your skills is coming to a close in the sense of you don't have a couple months to really. So this is more for that day one, walking into the gym. What can you do? So it's good to be here.
Yeah. So we'll talk about tangible aspects of tryouts first. Tangible is touchable, visible, seeable, measurable. The first thing that's clear, and this is actually Coach Wooden's primary number one component for making teams and competing, and that is conditioning. That's a tangible. What is the kid's condition? Is he or she ready physically? Have they been doing the work, the running, the skill development? Are they ready to go? So that's number one.
I mean, the second thing we talked about, and this is related to conditioning, is defensively. Like, we want to see kids, as a coach, one of the first things you notice is, okay, can that kid stay in front of a kid, right? Does he look like he's in enough shape to play individual defense? Team defense is a little bit different, but it's the same idea as, can you stay in front of your man? So if you're a few days away from tryouts and you want to do a couple things to prepare, then, try some defensive slides back and forth, just a couple feet, quick bursts. And when you walk onto the court, really try to feel like you're that quick movement side to side, laterally, up and back. It's such an obvious thing to see when a kid can stay in front of his man. And honestly, if you can play defense, there's likelihood that you can play, because defense is obviously a huge part of the game.
The next tip this is so basic. Run the course.
Right.
Run the course. My coach in college used to say the game is won and lost between the rims, right? So whether your kid has skill or not, hopefully their condition is good and they will run. Now, they don't necessarily even need to be involved in the play. Okay, this is a tryout, right? Whether the kid is trailing or whether the kid is off to the side, sprint, and then sprint back. This is a major tangible, right? Coaches will see this right away. So here's a tip: run.
Yeah, it's like when the rebound is had and your team gets the ball, so many kids kind of stand and, especially in tryouts where it's sort of unorganized, the scrimmages are maybe, and it's like you don't have set plays yet, you don't know who the point guard is yet, you don't really know who so everyone sort of looks for the ball right away, right? There's four guys wanting the ball sometimes. No, just be a kid who just busts it down the court. Go run wide or run right down the middle, right towards the basket, look for the ball. And those things stick out as a positive for sure. That's a simple play. So there's other things. We talk about this. A lot of times kids want to do something that stands out to the coach, right? I want to make a highlight because I feel like I have to do that to impress, or I want to, there's 40 other kids in the gym. I have to do something that makes me stick out. And a lot of times we're looking for people who can just make simple plays, make an easy pass, right? Not over dribble, right? When you catch the ball, face the basket, get in triple threat. Don't try to do too much. So and that's a big part of a tangible, that it's a little counterintuitive, because sometimes kids think they have to do too much, or they have to do more to stick out. But sometimes that can lead to mistakes and negative plays.
There's a quick Magic Johnson story. Probably 5 or 6 years ago, Michigan State was struggling. They had lost 2 or 3 games in a row. They were getting beat by opponents they shouldn't have gotten beat by. Magic shows up, goes into the locker room. Of course, they're going to let him talk.
Yeah.
And he says, they're waiting for some, word from above. And he said, make easy passes. This is the entire content of his message to Michigan State at this time.
Yeah.
Make the simple pass. And this is great for the younger players too. They hold the ball too much. They don't see the court. Move the ball and then move yourself, and that will help you in tryouts.
Right.
Something that we talk about, which is, again, this is part of our mental strength training. Don't try harder, try your best. There's a big difference. Kids often feel like they've got to work harder and harder, especially if they're doing poorly. Well, I'll just try even harder. Well, it often gets worse.
Right.
So you know what your limitations are. That's another comment we're going to talk about. Just do your very best and run the court.
Yeah, it's kind of like what do you do? You know, if you make a mistake, kids try harder, and we get to that later as an intangible. But mistakes can compound, and they can lead to mistakes. So just keep trying to be the best you can be, and don't worry about going harder, right? And then the last thing I thought about was do what you do well. And if you don't know what you do well, hopefully you can figure, you know, as you continue to play, you can find. And we're talking about as simple as like maybe you can set a screen because you're a bigger kid and you just feel like you could show the coach that you can be a very effective screener. Or maybe you are really quick and hard-nosed, and so what you do well is you get right in that kid's face on defense. And that's kind of your calling card. So a lot of times kids need to think about that as, what do I do well? Like go into your tryout with one or two things that you feel like over other things. Like maybe it's shooting. Maybe you're a catch and shoot kid and you really are good at that. So find spots on the court and understand that if that's a strength of yours, you have to display that strength. On the flip side, don't worry about what you don't do well, at least especially in these first couple of days at tryouts. And don't try to like fix it all those first couple of days. You want to work on those things, but you want to also show a coach that you can fit a role on a team. You can be a defensive stopper. You can be a guy who will get rebounds on the offensive boards. You can be a guy who will set screens. You could be a ball handler. You could be a shooter. But you can't, not many players can do all of those things the best on the court, right? There's kids who have fulfill roles, and so you want to try to show a coach that you can fulfill something that you do well.
Listen, communication is also a tangible. You've got to be able to talk and communicate. Call out the screens.
Yeah.
Pick up a buddy who's made a poor play and say, "Hang in there. We'll get him next time." When you're being subbed in or subbed out, talk to the guy and say, "I'm guarding 23." You know, communicate.
Right.
It's just so basic, and it's one of the hardest things that we see for young players to understand. Right? They're quiet.
Yeah.
Right. Get out there and don't be afraid. Okay. So we're going to jump into intangibles now. This is one of my favorite aspects of basketball because how kids react to adversity tells the coaches a lot about the player, and it also tells the player a lot about himself or herself. So the first intangible, very basic, show up on time, okay? Make eye contact and show up on time.
Yeah, preferably show up early. I mean, first day of tryouts, if possible, like, you know, tryouts start at 3, and if you can be there 10 minutes, 15 minutes early, if school gets out or whatever, you know, just be in the gym, get ready to go, do a little bit of stretching on your own, and that goes a long way. Coaches don't like it when kids show up even like a minute before or whatever. Like that's not on time. Like basketball time should be, 10, 15 minutes early, and then you're ready to go when the time comes.
Oh, that's the old Vince Lombardi comment. On time is 10 minutes early.
Yeah.
So show up on time.
And then we talk about a few things. This is kind of like the beginning of tryouts, right? If you don't know who the coach is, like even if you kind of know who he is, but maybe you haven't really met him, or you kind of know who he's going to be, but it just goes a long way. And this isn't sucking up. This is just go up to him, shake his hand, introduce yourself, give him your first and last name, and introduce yourself. Hey, coach, I'm so and so. Nice to meet you. Looking forward to a good season. And then you go on the court and you kick tail. But you do this right away, and it sort of sends like you're here to you mean business. This is a serious thing for you. You're not just kind of here to show up and do what you can. But so introduce yourself. What a simple thing, but it can go a long way.
Well, that's a life skill too. And
right.
Those parents that know basics know that we often talk about elements of youth sports that apply off the court. First impressions are critical throughout your life. So these kids can be taught at a relatively young age that the first impression they make is very important, whether it's in the classroom with the teacher, a potential employer, the coach. So making eye contact, showing up on time, introducing yourself, really, really positive. This leads into your body language, right? What kind of body language do you have in the tryout? Coach had a great comment. Heads up, eyes up, chin up. Really good, really positive. So that's a great tip for tryouts.
Yeah, I mean, look the coach in the eyes when they're talking. These are simple things, right? But I think of it from a coach's perspective, and you've been there. Like, you're in the huddle, you've blown the whistle, you called the kids in. There's always those kids who are looking you dead in the eye, and their heads up. They're kind of nodding their head when you're talking to them, like, because they're with it, right? They're with you. And then there's the kids who are kind of in the back maybe, and they're sort of looking at the ground, or they're sort of kicking their feet at the ground, or they got a ball in their hands and they're flipping the ball around in their hands. Like, we know this, right, Coach? I mean,
it drives me crazy.
Yeah, the message that sends, right? It's like, this kid is going to have a hard time paying attention. He might be a hard time it's called coachability, right? So it's such a little thing, and yet it's such a big thing when you're in the huddle. Quit moving around. Don't even think about talking to somebody else. Even if it's your buddy and you were having a conversation. When that whistle blows, everything stops. You hustle in. You look them in the eye. You nod your head. You get your head up. Your eyes are up. Your chin's up. This is all the positive body language that we like to see.
Yeah, we actually have some don'ts. I mean, sometimes telling kids exactly what not to do is helpful. So here are a couple of don'ts. Never sit down. Okay, don't drink during the drills, right? Don't go run over to the water bottle and start drinking from the water. Try not to even lean on the wall, right? Stand up. I love that. Head up, eyes up, chin up, right?
Yep.
Never talk. This one will drive coaches nuts. Never talk when the coach is talking or giving direction. Try to get in front of the guy, make eye contact, be engaged, ready, attentive, and that will go a long way towards positive body language.
Yeah, and then all these things, again, we call them intangibles because they're not really like basketball on the court skills.
Yeah, there's no stats.
Right. These are essentially life skills. These are things that you can do. But as anyone knows, so much of any the work you do, the sports you play, it's these extra stuff that make a difference, right? Hustling from drill to drill, running instead of walking. And then so in the tryouts, you're destined to fail, right? You're destined to make a mistake. Sometimes you have bad tryouts. Sometimes you miss even worse than what you would have expected. But one of the things that's an intangible, okay, so how do you respond? How do you handle failure? On the court, something happens, the best thing you can do is just get back on defense and hustle and be a really good communicator. Don't try too hard to make up for it, right? Just do your best on the very next possession. We talked about that earlier. But we, as coaches, we like to see a kid who, right when something happens, something negative happens, what do they look like? Do they slouch? Do they put their head down? Do they jog back instead of sprint back? Oh my gosh, it happens all the time, right? It sounds easy, but the percentage of kids who do this correctly is pretty low. So you can stand out in a crowd of 40, 50 kids who come to a tryout, if it's that many, just by simply showing coaches how a positive reaction to failure.
This is for the parents and the kids out there who have been cut.
Yeah.
This is not an easy thing. This is an emotional time. They wanted to make the team. They didn't make it. I understand the torment that some of these parents and kids are going through, and I want to send a message out there. There are many kids who want to continue to play. They want to continue to try to make the team next year. And this is exactly what I tell the parents. If that kid is willing to actually try in the face of that failure, that kid has succeeded already. It takes courage, right? How many adults are going to have a major setback and then in short order continue to try again? Not very many.
Right.
So if the kids get cut and they have, this is in a previous podcast, that intrinsic motivation, that's what's inside of them, they want to continue to try, they've already succeeded. So encourage them, but hopefully it's coming from within them as well.
Yeah, definitely.
So the last one, this is the name of the game, right, with tryouts. Listen.
Yeah.
show up and listen. Many coaches, I know I've had these coaches, they will purposely give you instructions that are a little bit complicated or difficult to understand what to do, and they'll know right away who's paying attention, right? 2 kids per line max, right? There's an example. And all of a sudden, there'll be a line over there on the side of the gym with 4 kids in it. Right? That's one example. You have to listen closely, pay attention, and just do the best you can.
Yeah, a lot of times the environment in a tryout is kind of chaotic, right? Because it's before the team's been set. So there's a lot of kids in the gym. Sometimes there's only one coach. And so he's not going to be able to maybe break everything down so specifically and closely. He's going to tell you something simple to do, hopefully. And you've got to be a kid who kind of, and listening is not a given. Some kids are going to be looking on the other direction. Some kids aren't going to get it. So if you don't know what you're doing, right, because you didn't listen, try not to compound that mistake by being like the first kid to go and making sure that, you know, that your mistake is shown right there, that you haven't listened. Make sure you understand what's happening before you go. But yeah, it all starts with listening. And that's part of being coachable, and that's part of what coaches look for in a tryout.
You know, we keep track of the numbers where Yogi Berra used to say, it ain't bragging if it's true. Over 90% of the kids who come to basics make their school teams. It's actually into the mid-90s. And I think a combination of these tangible and intangibles is why our kids are ready, right? They know what to do and how to act. They also have sharp skills, or they're getting sharper through this training.
Right.
So we hope that you've enjoyed this podcast on tips for tryouts, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Yeah, good luck in tryouts. Thanks, Coach.